And I'm so excited to have her here. And been a big force in this music scene for quite some time. I don't know if any of you got to hear the interview on The Current with Venus and Lori Barbero, but it was really lovely, and it's still up there at The Current's website if you want to check it out. Again, thank you for coming to the Minnesota Music Summit. We still have a couple workshops this afternoon before we wrap things up here. Hopefully, we're still keeping an eye on the weather at the moment. We're still on for the Capri Theater, which is good because you would have a chance to catch Venus DeMars and Maida and some other great performances. But we'll keep you posted and let you know about that. But again, we have a few more workshops coming about booking in room 202 following this. But without further ado, I want to introduce our next guest. And as I said, been a force in this music scene for quite some time. I remember when I first moved to Minnesota, and yeah, that's my confession, I'm not a native, which is why I'm usually the first in the buffet line, just saying, and the last. When I first moved to the Twin Cities music scene, and I was starting to just get to know all the great artists that were here, All the Pretty Horses and Venus DeMars was one of those names that always came up. And so I couldn't be more happy to have her here with us today and to talk about her work as an artist in this community, and also maybe get a little preview of a memoir that's to come. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Venus DeMars.
So just saying outside, maybe I'll just take this out. Seems weird to be standing here with just, yeah. I'm gonna move this up here, and if you guys, it looks like it's just us. Yeah. Come on down. Yesterday I came to Lori Barbero's thing, and she had said that there was luck and talent were the two things. Maybe here I see, no, I positioned it so you're recording it, and you can't see me.
Here, let me check.
All right.
Yeah, we can see you now.
Kind of.
Here.
Luck and talent. So I'm still waiting on the luck, as you can see by. So it's been kind of an interesting journey. And I just came from a panel, actually, Trans Voices. One Voice has a thing going on over at McAllister College. And I was on a panel there, and they were talking about voices and trans people. And one of the issues was female to male, who were singers before. Trans people, their voices drop, and they have no idea where their voice is going to end up, or if it's even going to work. And they might have been very, very good singers previous. And I was on the panel, being the trans female, and having a masculine voice, which doesn't necessarily correlate with my physicality, and how that went, or how it continues to go. And that's an issue. And I'm happy to talk about anything. So, we don't just have to talk about, you can ask me anything. I've always said to do that. So I want to give you just kind of like a quick thing. I got up really early this morning, and I'm just like, I got to talk about this, and I got to talk about this. So I'm going to give you an overview of stuff. I've got some things from a couple segments from the memoir, which I think might be appropriate, that I can read. And then I kind of want to just dialogue. So think about what you want to ask me, and don't be shy, please. Because the whole thing about this is dialogue and talking and sharing stuff. Oh, and there is my spouse. She made it. And she's been part of this whole journey too. The rock and roll journey as well as the trans journey. And they both have their situations. And I've got a runny nose, so I apologize. That's perfect. See, right? All right. So, yeah, so I was in 2 bands before this. Before All the Pretty Horses, I was actually part of the 80s scene. I grew up in Duluth. Oh, wonderful. I grew up in Duluth, so you'd think I'd be used to this weather. No. And up there, it was in 79 and 80, I formed a band called The Rocks, which was kind of a punk cover band. And I was very inspired by the English punk movement, not the New York punk movement. So I was one of the group of people back then that had the bright colored hair and mohawks, that kind of stuff. And then that, of course, it was a cover band. My drummer, who became the first drummer of All the Pretty Horses, was going through kind of a Christian thing. And he left town and felt like this wasn't his path. And went and joined a commune down near here, which didn't work out. After that, we started, he moved back, we started another band called Straight Face, of all names. Oh, wonderful. Yeah, I got 2 now. Great. Yay. Called Straight Face, and that was after Bill, my first drummer, and I moved out of the house at 18. We hitchhiked, this is before I transitioned, we hitchhiked across the country to find his brother who escaped or ran away from the rumor was there was some drug deal that had gone bad and he disappeared from the family. He was living in Denver, and actually really what it was is that there wasn't social media and there wasn't cell phones, so he just never contacted and they lost track of him. We hitchhiked out there together, found him, brought him back after, he decided he reconnected, and he came back on his own after his car got totaled, and he became my synthesizer player. And we formed a band called Straight Face, and that was kind of modeled on this movement out of Japan called the Viz rock stuff. They were kind of drawing from the tradition of kabuki. So we started doing the white face and the kabuki makeup. What do you think happened? Everybody thought we were trying to kiss. So yeah, we did our best. And we got a manager in Minneapolis, West Bank Booking, and the other management company was Twin Tone. So they told us we had to move down to Minneapolis. We relocated down to Minneapolis. We were replacing the Replacements. Replacements was the usual warm-up band for the suburbs, and when they couldn't do it, we warm up for the suburbs. They were on Twin Tone, we were on West Bank Booking, and shortly after we relocated, West Bank Booking went bankrupt. I should have a clue by now that luck was not on my side. So we lost our management company. Everybody knows about the Replacements. Nobody knows about my band. But that's just as well, because I didn't want the Horses to be a comeback band. I'm just completely content with that being my first band. So we tried to make it work, but of course we were on our own. We couldn't. Lynette and I were married. The band broke up. We had a huge argument. There were Mexican dinners thrown across the parking lot after I let her know about that. We were really banking on it because if you remember with Lori here talking, that was the era when Minneapolis was really the hot spot, and their big record labels were pulling bands out of Twin Tone and making them famous. And it was a very exciting time, and we were feeling like it was, it's going to work. Well, anyway, it didn't. I put out an album on my own after the band broke up in 1984, the same year that Purple Rain was released, the album. And I remember seeing Prince in the clubs in the 7th Street Entry, and there was one time when they were playing in the big room, and we were in 7th Street Entry, and their bass player came in and watched us. This is the Straight Face band, and my bass player was like amazed and thrilled. Anyway, little stories like that. On my own, I put out Animal Angst on my own. Is vinyl, 500 pressings. Under my birth name, Stephen Grandel. It somehow found its way to Germany and got on the DJ lists in Germany. I have no clue how it did, because it was a physical record. This was way before anything like that. So it got known, and it got to be kind of a cult thing. And if you Google Animal Angst and Stephen Grandel, you'll find that it's like a significant album. Who knew? But at the time when it came out, Prince and Purple Rain was the one. I had hand done all the things on my album. And local reviewers thought that was wrong because they're all into technology, and the actual stuff to make the repetition and the whole synth voice thing and the altering voice thing, they wanted the authentic technology behind it and not the handmade thing that I did using tape recorders and editing and razor blade and all this stuff. So it pretty much got panned locally. But it's going now for like $60 or $70 on the internet if you're lucky enough to have one. I only have a few left. And I'm thinking about releasing it again. Blah, blah, blah. Okay, enough of that. Let's move on. In 1988, I came out as trans to Lynette, and subsequently to my circle of family, and then it got larger and larger. I had formed another band called Aloud to promote Animal Angst. Let's see, in '88 I did that, and then in 1994, I've been in the art world. I started doing art stuff and filmmaking and all that, and became one of the rifle sport artists. The Big Blue Doors, if anybody remembers, that's my doors. I did that, and I became an installation artist inspired by the New York graffitis, rock stars, art stars that were going on back then in the '80s. I still do painting and all of that. Then in 1994, my drummer, Bill, who had been with me with all these previous bands, really wanted to get back together and do some music. So we formed the Horses with Ed Ford, Bill, and me. And I had transitioned. I socially transitioned. I was beginning to physically transition. So I came out to them as such, just because I needed them to know, and they were very kind to me. A mutual friend of ours, who acted as my manager when I was touring with Laura Jane Grace, confessed to me that they were freaked out when I told them. So it was a big deal, but I didn't really know it was. But they decided to stay with me, and we couldn't get into clubs. It was very difficult. I was very sexualized with the press. Couldn't get into the regular clubs. We started gravitating to the metal clubs because they were a little bit more open, and then alternative spaces. Lynette is here so she can correct me. I said, "You're going to be there, right?" So if I get off track. Bill leaves shortly after we formed the band. He again has another personal crisis, and he has to leave, and we're like on the verge of disbanding. And I decide and I hadn't really invested in the band at that point, but then I decided to take it over and really try to make it work. So I put together a whole bunch of different series of drummers. I had like 4 or 5 drummers, one of which was the drummer for Run Westy Run, who Laura talks about, used to manage Run Westy Run. And, but it was a time when it was an embarrassment to be trans. I don't know if you guys can understand that. It was an embarrassment. I couldn't get bandmates. That particular drummer, he came up with some story, a fairly convoluted story of why I could not let anybody know that he was drumming for me. But it was pretty obvious he was embarrassed about it and didn't want to associate with my band. But he liked my drummer before, so he was doing us a favor. He'll deny it, I'm sure. But that was the impression I got. And I got that from all the clubs and everything and the press. I did get a few bits of encouragement from a few different people in the press and from some of the clubs, but mostly from the audience. The audience propelled us forward. Eventually, my drummer became Matt Batchelor, who would light his drums on fire. And we really started moving into this kind of fetish, goth, punk type of stuff. I was pursuing that as a trans female because it gave me empowerment. It gave me strength on stage. I was inspired by Wendy O. Williams, who I saw in Superior, Wisconsin, and that's where I got my electric tape pasties. Anybody knows about the band, that's my homage to her. And I was inspired by her strength. She's got her own story, but I was inspired by her strength on stage. I had a jury duty in 1995. They determined that I was not a protected class because the judge was confused about my gender, and a ruling was made that it was okay to assume that I would be in favor of child molestation because of the clothing that I wore, and it made as much news as could possibly be back then before social media. I went all over Minnesota, and it pretty much outed both Lynette and I in a big way. And they were wrong, because they had just passed the Human Rights Act in 1994, which should have covered me. But the judge must have assumed that since I don't know what he was thinking. He didn't know, or he made that ruling. It made the news. It was significant, but I didn't know it until it was in all the radio stations, the Drive 2 mornings and everything, using my name, using Lynette's name. It was a big deal, and very scary. Lynette was worried about losing her job. I had a chance to fight it in court, Lambda, but we were afraid that she would lose her job because she hadn't been tenured yet. She's a professor, and it was a tough world for trans people back then. There was nothing. It's kind of hard to get your head around now. In 1995, I take too many hormones and I shut down my liver. So I turned completely golden. And I have to fight to reestablish my hormone treatments. And I had already I'd done all the treatments and everything on my own with a doctor that I found, and so I constructed myself. I didn't go to PHS, I just did punk rock. I was just a pest. Until they finally relented and let me see a doctor who was willing to see me, and he helped me construct this. But of course I was also, I had also found underground hormones, and I was not wanting to waste them, and in a hurry, and it shut my liver down. So that was an issue for us and me. Matt stayed with me, and then we drove out to New York for the first time because I could not get any gigs here, and my manager at that time was Katie Thomasberg, who just passed away a couple of years ago. She was my manager after Bill left. They were kind of a couple. She stayed on to be my manager and take over some backup singing, which Bill was doing. She put together the show, the tour for us in New York. None of us knew what New York was all about at all. So we had a horrible tour. We went out there, nobody was there. Lori talked about playing at the Pyramid Club in a pouring rain. We played at the Pyramid Club in a pouring rain. Nobody significant came in. That's when she got her break. I had no doubt. And who knew? The Pyramid Club, they had the cool club on top floor, and then they had this weird little club in the basement that looked like a cafeteria. That's the club we were in. Who knew? We walked into the big club and they said, oh, no, you're on the other stage, so go back outside, go down these stairs, that's where you're performing. Nobody showed up except the other band, and they left early. Yeah, it was a disaster. So in the memoir, I talk about this whole thing. In the memoir, that's probably going to be the graphic novel part, because there's just so much I can tell with graphics, and I can't just write it. So that was a failure. I never wanted to go back to New York again, ever. It was terrible. Tiffany Johnny Cakes joins. After that, Lynette and I go out in '97. Lynette and I go out to London on a vacation. I'm trying to network and find out what the music scene is like out there, since, remember, I was inspired by the London punks. So I wanted to find out all about that. I didn't get very far, and doors were shut, and people had a really hard time with a trans person in London. Really hard. I confronted constantly. You wouldn't think. Constantly. It was exhausting. And then I get a chance to do a work study thing out in New York, working with Meredith Monk. That fell through, but I had already got my ticket, so I went out there anyway. I hooked up with a friend of mine, Karen Platt, who is a cartoonist that I knew from here. She introduced me to Brooke, who was the owner of the Meow Mix out there, and then brought me around. The two of them brought me around to the other clubs, so Squeezebox at Don Hills and CBGB's, and I began to understand how New York functioned. They functioned, which I know that sounds strange because that's what we do here now, but we didn't do this here. Out there, what they did is they had theme nights, and on the theme nights, they would have a host, and then they would have the bands come in as guests. So the star was a host of the night. So Squeezebox is where Hedwig started. John Cameron Mitchell was one of the hosts that was there often. And he developed that stage persona, which eventually became the stage. He was more theater, but he would do this and kind of practice. And so I met him out there. He was on one of the nights we were there, and he was in the basement putting on his makeup. We were talking about trans stuff and pasties, blah, blah. So I got a chance to see what Squeezebox was all about. I played there a few times. And Meow Mix became the center, kind of the linchpin. I actually booked my first gig out in New York that we flew out. We just began to fly out. We didn't drive out anymore. Because that was also what it was. We rented, you cabbed, that's how you did it. You didn't bring all your equipment out, it was stupid. So we acted like the locals acted out there. Nobody had their own equipment. All the clubs had house kits, had house things. You just taped them all together, you made them work. And that's what we started learning and doing. And the Meow Mix was the center one. I had booked that first gig through the US mail and a fax machine. You can believe it. That's the truth. I was beginning to collect at my fetish outfits and getting more of a persona and a strength on stage. We were getting more and more dynamic. We started working at CBGB's we had another trip to London. We stopped in overnight. My tour manager, Matthew Hopping, who started Ground Zero's founder Chigoko, became my touring agent, and he was relocated to New York and introduced us to Dean Johnson's Homocore at an event again. So we started doing that, and then I met some other people, and so things were growing. In 1998, I split the band in two. We had a chance to tour England, but that fell through. It was through the early internet. But that I switched, I broke the band up into two, so there was a touring band, which included Jendine and Pandora, and who had come in as my bass player, and then my original Matt and Ed. That eventually, I eventually moved to the touring thing, and that became my steady band. I had a drummer, Terika, for a little while. So Jendine joined in 1999 full-time, and at that point we became an all-female, in quotations, according to City Page's band. I actually got it wasn't bad. Yeah, March 3rd, 1999. The new all-female, in quotations, version of transgender sensationalists, All the Pretty Horses, Let It All Hang Out at Pharmacy Ekla, Neo-Gothic Fetish Ball at the Saloon, February 8th, and blah, 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 and how we're going to do that. And then you link it to the founder, Chigolo, and he was very amazed at how we couldn't tell the gender of anybody in the club. So these are the early days. We were doing a lot of fetish events, and nobody cares about fetish events now, but back then it was a big deal. And we were at the forefront of that, bringing all that stuff in. 1999, filmmaker approached me and wanted to start the film Venus of Mars. And so that started filming in 1999. We put out a record. She followed us to a UK tour and to New York multiple times. And the film premiered in Amsterdam in 2003. Tempest, my bass player, a trans, joined in 2004. I struggled with that because I didn't want an all-trans band. And then a friend of mine said, well, you kind of already do. So then I said, okay, because we needed a bass player. And so Tempest joined, so we became an all-trans band at that point. And she stayed with us through 2006 when I took a hiatus because I was getting terribly frustrated. So what you have to understand here is I had no record label. I was a record label, Lynette was a record label, my credit cards were the record label. I was in horrible debt. Go ahead.
I forgot the part about the lawyer.
The lawyer. Right after 9/11, just 2 months after. In November, we were touring England, the first trip out there, and that we had put together, which I could talk about. That was a whole different thing. And my tour manager, Matthew, had gotten us a meeting with a New York lawyer, who that was our big break to get into the major labels. So, and we were known in New York by then. We were part of the scene then, and so we all went there, and up to the top floor, and it overlooked Ground Zero. I remember looking out over Ground Zero. I actually have the chapter that I wrote, which is a short chapter. I could read that. But the lawyer basically said that you want to know if I could possibly consider not being trans. So And I said, no, that's why you're talking to me. And so he said, I can't help you. And so we lost our paper. So yeah, so that was that. And then I'm just like all the way up to the hiatus. And then I do the hiatus band. And then I got new members. I came out of hiatus in 2008, and I've been cobbling together the show since then, put out some things. So I guess that's really kind of in a very quickly just through everything. But it was very difficult. And as a trans person, it was extremely difficult. And I could expand on that, but I don't want to go on. So tell me what you want. I can answer questions. I can read a chapter. I can do any of that. There's so few of us here because of the damn snowstorm out there. We don't even know if we're going to perform tonight, so I'm waiting. They're going to decide that later, so we might have to reschedule that. Questions?
Oh, I'd like to hear what you've written about.
Read?
Yeah.
I'll read. All right. Okay, this is a New York thing. Friday, November 9th, afternoon, 2001, New York City. She tells me about the stuffed animals, Lynette, after the meeting. When we reconnect, she tells me there are hundreds of them, stuffed animals in all sizes, all kinds, mostly teddy bears, many of them with dust marks and goggles put on. They are in piles or tied attached, all along the perimeter, attached or stacked next to the blue wood or chain-linked fencing which surrounds the whole place. The animals are either clean and new or rained on and dirt-stained. Notes are attached, or taped up, or set atop. Notes and ribbons, and flowers. Many, many flowers, wilted flowers, fresh flowers, bouquets still fresh in their thin plastic protection cones, bouquets brown and wilted back to weeds. Then there are the letters, longer than notes. Some are pages long, some in plastic bags, some already weather-worn and unreadable, some brand new and crisp, as if just written. And finally the photos, so many photos. Ground zero. Our meeting with the music lawyer in his office, high in a building overlooking ground zero. I gazed down at the pit. Shortly after we arrived, still mingling, I tried to focus. How do I deal with a music lawyer? Can this actually unfold? All this time pushing, all the money I spend, all the flights. Is this how it unfolds? Is this how we finally move forward? Question after doubtful question as I look into the pit, an odd concoction of excitement mixed with anxiety, mixed with horror, ricochets my brain. Behind me, my band begins to sit around a massive black table. Below me, yellow earth movers crawl. Yellow hard hats scatter. Tiny workers move mounds of dirt, tangles of steel. Cranes sway. Smoke rises from deep fires, still smoldering. The grave, the remains where towers stood. Matthew is next to me now. He looks down too. Tells me sad things. Tells me recollections of seeing the towers on fire from the Brooklyn Bridge as he bikes to work 2 months earlier. I remember this. I tell him something about how amazing it is that morning when I get through to him on his cell. Just then, while he bikes across the bridge, and just that once. It happens directly after that downtown Minneapolis UK tour meeting between Shannon, Nicole, and I. Plans are to finish loose ends and bookings between their respective efforts. Radio broadcasts interrupt first while I drive. Then television broadcasts of CNN video really interrupts. As we sit around a clean table, coffees in hand. In fact, yeah, that shuts our meeting down completely. Pre-cell, I worry for Lynette, still asleep at home, and now I worry for everyone else. I need to call everyone in New York I know. So I drive home to our landline. I call Matthew first and he picks up. Tells me what he sees from that bridge. Tells me about the fire being so immense and the smoke. In my memory, I ask him if he's okay. Glad that he's answered his phone. In my memory, he assures me he and Eddie are fine. Just stopped on the bridge looking. And now, in my memory, he tells me it's as if they're gone. The towers seem gone. I don't believe him. He doesn't trust himself. He tells me he has to go. I hear it, the panic. We hang up. Then all the New York phones stop working for a week. In February of 2018, the evening of the 19th, Lynette and I argue over my memory. I read her what I've written and she challenges it. I get upset, dig around Wikipedia, find a minute-to-minute timeline of the events, but not enough to validate my memory. And so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't call Matthew at all. Or maybe I do, and I'm correct on that score, but perhaps both towers have already fallen when my landline gets through to his cell. Matthew can verify, or maybe he can't. But that's what I remember. Doesn't matter. The towers fell anyway. Here now, in the music lawyer's office far above ground zero, Matthew is telling me we should sit. Join everyone at the table. So I do. We turn from the window. My thoughts still scattered. They jump forward to the photo shoot Matthew schedules for us this evening. I struggle to remain focused on the present, but stories of Jody Ake's photography studio fascinate me. Eddie and Matthew describe his process. Yesterday, the morning after we fly in, and before we shop along Avenue of the Americas in search of two 110 to 220 European electric converters, which Matthew finds a week earlier after I tell him we need them for our UK tour. Real ones, not tiny hairdryer travel converters. Our amps and lights draw too much power. And we fly to London from JFK in just 2 days, and those two converters are way fucking heavy. Great. And now my mind relands on Jody's photos again. In a few hours, I experience the actual process, done on glass plates. Authentically, he uses ether to develop the emulsion, spreads that emulsion on by hand with the glass surface, just before placing it within a wooden, black-bellowed land camera, just like in an old-timey silent film. Black cloth thrown over his back and all. He checks his subject's position and hold, and then lights an actual tray of flash power. A fire erupts, whooshed brilliance, immediately followed unexpectedly by a significantly loud bang. And back here again with the lawyer. We sit around a ridiculously monolithic black table, high above Manhattan, in a building just next to ground zero. The day is gray, rain threatens, then clears away to blue sky. We walk to this entrance some 20 minutes earlier. As we walk, I notice the metal grills over walk, don't walk signs are so crammed with debris that it's impossible to tell which light is flashing, save for red or white refractions shining around the edges. Matthew runs towards a group of pigeons on the sidewalk. Mox stomps his feet as if to crush them. I yell, tell him not to hurt them. He laughs, tells me of course he's not going to hurt him. Crazy kid, it's just New York. The lawyer is making an introduction. I refocus on the present, like a carnival ride, like playing Frogger, like everything's so quick that I can only react. Surrounding me is the lawyer, Matthew, Jendine, Pandora, Shannon, Emily, and Louis, Jody's agent, who also happens to know this lawyer. Far below, and walking slowly, Lynette wanders, observes destruction, pauses here and here to read pieces of paper, grief and sadness, overwhelming loss, relationships torn, families destroyed, printed words. Years later, she tells me that day it fueled her own sadness as she wanders the perimeter, waiting for me to remember her, waiting for me to include her in my obsession to move the band forward. Her own loss surrounds everything. Distance between us broadens, step by step. I am far above, oblivious. I had pictured some old white guy in an overly expensive suit when Matthew tells me of this meeting. Instead, however, sitting at the head of this monolithic, polished black table, around which my band sits in all punk rock tatters, is a youngish, late 30s or maybe early 40s, tall, handsome African-American music lawyer. My imagination fails me, I think, but it's accurate on this, the expensive suit, well-tailored. Despite my experience of shut doors, dismissive ridicule, and the lowest of expectations from clubs, booking agents, and most everyone else in the industry, I feel an almost electrified possibility. And I think maybe I'm startled, maybe I'm hopeful, maybe. Later, it's revealed that he tries to tell me that I should not be trans. And it all goes away. Any other questions? Trans-related, relationship-related, rock and roll-related?
How do you keep that confidence in yourself? I mean, the whole, getting doors slammed continuously, and you just keep moving forward. It's really, it's really an achievement to keep moving forward. It's impressive.
So in 2014, I got a chance to tour with Laura Jane Grace. And I would run across, while I performed, trans kids, or closeted trans adults, or just people who felt like an outsider. And they would come up to me and they would really impress on me how they loved what we did, what I was doing. And those little bits kept me going and kept me trying. And then just my naivety, perhaps, kept me thinking that somehow I was going to make it as an independent, a true, I hate the term indie band, because there's always a record label behind it. I am a real indie band. Credit cards are behind it. But that kept me going. And then in 2014, or right before that, when Laura came out, and it was the right time to come out as trans, and Rolling Stone did that big article about her, if you guys remember, and then my Facebook wall got filled with it from fans that were trying to bolster my disappointment, I guess, And it didn't affect, I just got pissed jealous. I was so mad. And then I got humbled because I got to meet her. Because Shannon, you guys know Shannon Blowtorch, she's a big promoter in town now, DJ, blah, blah, blah. She was my dancer back in the day, and she was my number one in the business. She helped me do all the work of booking and managing and strategizing and all of that. We worked as a team. She was contacted by Laura's people because Laura at that time was doing this AOL documentary and wanted gender variant people to interview. And Shannon, being a very generous and good friend, told her about me. And so she wanted to meet me. And we did meet and we connected. And then she found out through her fan base that I'd been around a long time and they all knew about me already. And that summer, she, through an email, invited me to tour with her. I didn't know, you know, it doesn't happen. But once I realized it was for real, I said, yeah. And I was on the verge of disbanding my band at that time and just going solo with a solo project that I had on the burner. And it was like, no, we're getting back to, we're doing this. So I called them both and said, we're doing this. Couldn't bring my dancers, but we just made it a 3-piece. I just bought a van because my old one died. And I bought a new one from a trip I had down in, I did Pride down in Bisbee, Arizona. So I just bought a van. And so we piled in, and we got to the place, and we toured with her. And it was fantastic. What I saw, compared to me seeing a few closeted trans people or sometimes years of not seeing another trans person, were sold out clubs with trans kids and their parents. And then the Laura's fan base had stayed, but she lost a lot of her fan base when she came out. But the fan base that stayed with her were faithful, and they stayed there. They became immediate trans allies. Just boom, right there. All these old punkers. It was great. And so they were on the outside, and then all ages kids were on the inside, and they were running around. It was amazing. It was amazing. I can't tell you how amazing. And then it's just the three of us, because we're the real thing. We're just like us. And so I'm out there, and I'm in my corset and my fishnets and my thigh highs and my electric tape pasties, you know, doing the whole fetish thing, because that's what I had to do to prove that I wasn't faking it, or I wasn't a shtick, or I wasn't. There's articles about people criticizing me for capitalizing on my sexuality. Nobody believed that we were married. So the press was pretty mean, and they made really significant things. So I had to do this to prove that I was for real. This was a real deal. I was really there. Laura didn't have to do that. She could just come out and say that. And she could still wear her rock and roll jeans and her t-shirt and her hair. And the kids just got it. It was no problem. And so I would go out to the merch table, because it's just me, and I'm selling merch. I didn't have the staff. I got to know all of her salespeople, and we got to be friends. And the other opening band, you know, I got to know everybody. And then it's me out there in my stage gear with my lipstick probably smeared around because I had just been singing in the microphone. And the kids would come up and they would be amazed. And they want me to sign things, and they want pictures taken, and then they would give the phone to their parents who were my age to take the pictures of me and their kid. And it's like, really? And you remember the story I told you about the jury duty? I had avoided being around kids after that because I was so scared of that attitude, because that was the attitude. I was a pervert back then. I was part of the fetish community. I was broken. That is the scenario that I lived, and I came out and I survived under. And so I'm standing with the young teenager trans boy or trans girl, and they're thrilled, and they have the product, the t-shirt, and I'm in my pasties, and their parents are there, and they take the picture, and then the parent comes over to me so often and just says, "I'm so glad you and Laura are doing this." And no concern about danger of me around their kids. They just want their kids healthy. They want a role model that kids can be who they want to be. It's really moving. And so all the trouble of all the struggle, it was worth it. Now I don't know what'll happen. I don't know if I'll get anywhere. I don't know if I'll get recognized. I'll have to die. And then maybe they'll say something about it. Dig up that old Anna Lyons record. I'm going to keep working. I love it. My producer is in New York. I like to go out there. And I've got another album I want to write. The band, my new band, which is a combination of my hiatus band and my reformed All Pretty Horses band after the hiatus, and some original members, dancers. Emily Hooper is still dancing with me. She was there at the beginning. They want to do an album, so I got to write that. But it's I'm 58 now, so now it's not the trans thing; it's the age thing. I'm not somebody that a record label wants to invest in.
Talk about the phrase you invented when we were being audited.
Oh yeah, I did. I had an audit. I had 2 years of audit hell. Google Venus DeMars and taxes, and you'll see an incredible story. We won.
Yay.
We won, but it cost a lot. But it all got paid in donations, and I came up with the term legacy artist to describe myself. I made it up. I didn't want to say an old artist. and the auditor actually used that in a report, saying that I had not proven myself to be successfully established as a legacy artist. So I fucking made that up. It was ridiculous. I could do a whole memoir on that 2-year journey. So, yeah. So we're working, I'm writing this memoir. Lynette, my spouse, is writing a memoir at the same time. We're not trying to write them together, but it just happened. So they're kind of, we're sharing the timeline I put together, which is crazy. As big a document as you can make on Adobe Illustrator. It can't get any bigger. And I've got it down to the smallest that you can make for letters so that I can zoom in and see it. And it spans primarily 10 years, but then I have bookended it in 2 directions a little bit. And that's what we're using to write the memoir and the memories. And our relationship suffered for me trying to be famous and trying to be a rock star. And then trying to transition and stay on that for my health, mental health, and it's so the book is about all that struggle. It's hard, and I came out in the early days, like I told you, nobody knew. The medical community didn't know. Nobody knew. Counselor didn't know. Nobody knew. We didn't know. It was really fucked up. So, it's such a different world now. Any more questions? I'm just going to ramble. Where are we at?
Where did the band name come from?
That one. Lynette came up with the name.
From Cormac McCarthy or
Lynette did. it. I was thinking more when she came up with the name. I didn't know about the McCarthy novel, which I eventually decided I had to read because everybody kept asking me, and then it was like, oh God, no, it's like nothing to do with this. I love the book, but it's like, no, I want to be a cowboy. Oh, I got the cowboy boots. I was thinking about the nursery rhyme, All the Pretty Horses. So that's what I had in my mind. But Lynette.
It's also the horse thing.
And the horse thing, yeah. I had a lot of horse images in my dreams. That goes back to my artwork. And I have very vivid dreams, nightmares, really, always. And I pull from that to draw and do things. I used to have my mom, the doctor said it was night terrors when I was little. So I've always had nightmares, but I've come to embrace them, and I enjoy them. But they can certainly make you sit up at night. Yeah, so All the Pretty Horses came from that. And I like the idea of pretty in a tough rock and roll band. I like that, and it helped give me to push the envelope of who I was on stage. And because of that, I guess you could be, we had bottles thrown at us from women who felt like I was stealing their sexuality. It's the early days of trans. I was not seen as anything real. So I had to be fierce. And Shannon was there. That's how I met Shannon. She was the one that kept the bottle thrower at bay. And then we talked after the gig, and she brought in the grinder. So she brought the grinder in, and then we started just working with it, and then I just kept it. So that's where the grinder came from. I got that threats.
Well, I know we talked about one time about the Laura Jane Grace, the touring, like logistics of a trans person touring is different.
Oh, yeah.
There's considerations, I think we talked about Idaho and.
Yeah, Idaho. Yeah, we had a show in Idaho where right before I was going on stage, they said I had to cover up. And it was like 2 minutes before I was going on stage, and everybody got upset. And they hadn't talked about it before. And so I had to put my bra back on and skirt back on in order to go out on stage because they just decided it was too much. And so I did, but I took the skirt off, and we did the grinder, and the grinder disappeared. The stage crew came up behind me and grabbed it because they didn't want me to do it again, and took it away with the threat of not paying me, and I just went off on them, and they brought it back. Yeah, that was kind of an insane night, and then traveling from place to place, I couldn't pee. So, because it was dangerous to pee. So I would dehydrate myself all night. When we got to the club, I would try to hydrate again right after sound check, and then I would just like drink as much as I could until the night was done, and then I wouldn't touch a thing, so that I could make it the 8 hours the next day without stopping. Most of the time it worked, not always. And one time in California, going from California to Las Vegas, our last gig actually, I had to stop because I couldn't do it. And we stopped at one of these big, and this is 2014, okay. I stopped at one of these big wayside rests with the men and the women, and is one of the big ones. And we walked around. My band at that time was The Freak and Jazz, two men. And so they just went in without a thought, And I was walking towards the women's room, and right next to the women's room entrance was a sign that said, if you do not match your biological gender and are in this bathroom, you will be arrested. 2014, California. And I walked past the sign. And I peed, and I walked back up. And I asked Jazz and LaFreak if they had a sign on their door about that, and they didn't. And I wish to God I had taken a photograph of it, but I did not want to get caught. So, and it's still in the news. And now there's a backlash of the trans voices being more militant and more demanding for rights. And so we have more of a backlash than before. And it's even, I sometimes feels more dangerous now than it did in the 90s when I'm out there. So it's a better world, but it's a difficult world. Questions? I think, are we done?
Yeah,
Where's
we're
my
right
post?
at 2.
Are we two? Okay.
Unless anyone has anything else.
I hope to have the manuscript on my book done. I actually have bookmarks if anybody wants. I can get them there. And Lynette is having a book release at Loft Book for her book of poetry, which also talks a few of them about our relationship and being in a trans relationship. Can you grab my purses
Yeah,
right there on the,
sure.
on the chair?
Besides tonight, do you have any other shows coming up?
Yes, I do. Let me think now, I will be, the band, full band, is going to headline 331 on one of the nights of the Art World. And I love playing at 331 because it's crazy and it's a tiny little stage, and if I can, I'll get my dancers involved, and it's gonna be stupid. I love that.
No cover fee.
Yeah, no cover fee. I don't know what, I don't think I even do it for that. Yeah, so yes, please come to that. I think that's going to be great. I think it's the 15th. I'm not sure. No. What is it? It's coming up anyway. It's look at 331. They have a bunch of acts, so we're just one of the mix. But we are closing that particular night. I have these
It's the
bookmarks.
19th, May 19th. It's May 19th.
May 19th, thank you. And then what else? I'm in Duluth. I'm performing in Duluth with the band. On the 15th, there's a Lake Street Live. I'm doing that. I'm on the list to do the Pride up there. I am going to be, the band is also going to be at Mortimer's here on a Thursday night for Simon Calder's nights that he's putting together. And it's a Thursday of Pride weekend. So it'll be, we didn't get invited to do Pride locally. So, so we will, that'll be our unofficial Pride thing here. And so that's my local things, yeah. We're also gonna be in Bisbee and playing Pride out there. So we still have a footprint around the country, but yeah, locally. And I keep continually doing little solo things. If we decide what we're doing tonight, or
I know, we will have to look at the weather. Probably, we'll make the decision soon about tonight. I mean, we're so looking forward to the show, but it is getting pretty nasty
it's
out there.
nasty, yeah.
So we have to check in with our partners at the Capri and the film festival, but.
So I'll totally reschedule with whatever.
Yeah, well, if it doesn't happen tonight, we will just do another event in Venus. So, and maybe it will be when the book's out. Who knows?
Yes.
So,
Yes. So
be
stay
great.
tuned.
Well, thank you so much, Venus.